G'day Australians. That might be a bit bent, eh? I'll have to go like that. How do we stop that? Huh? We'll put this pair of glasses under it. No, that one. What about this remote? We'll put this remote under it. Make it straight. Oh, look at that. Fuck me. How's that? Nah. Oh, it's difficult. Hey, that'll about do it. Righto. What it means to become an Australian. I'm an immigrant. When I grew up in a little tiny place with just a post office and a petrol pump out the front and a general store all in one, in a little tiny place called Waiatira. In fact, I was at Waikiki, which is near Waiatira, in between Whangarei and Dargaville, in the far north of the North Island of New Zealand, about 160 kilometres north of Auckland, and sort of, halfway to the Bay of Islands, maybe another 100 k's to the Bay of Islands. I'm not I'm not real good on New Zealand, because on geography, because I well, I'll tell you in the story, but we didn't. So on my 16th birthday, it was the day I turned 16. We hopped on a plane. My uncle had been living in Australia for quite a while, and he lived in Perth in Western Australia. And he was sending us brochures and saying, look at the price of a video recorder. Back in those days, we had video recorders. We didn't have USBs or DVDs or anything. We had video recorders, and they were $1,200 in New Zealand, and they were $200 in Perth in Western Australia. And petrol was $1 a litre in 1985 in New Zealand, pretty much. And we had an oil refinery that we imported the crude and made it into petrol and stuff, and we still had $1 a litre. And in Perth it was like 26 cents a litre if they were having a price war. They used to have price wars, the service stations, where they'd cut it down so it was like no profit at all, or losing money just to get you in the door and try and sell you something. But they were less a chocolate shop those days, the service stations. They still had oil and stuff in them, and everything. There was the newspaper, which is the only place you could find a job, as in there was no internet, for jobs and stuff. So the newspaper was just full of jobs. Carpenters, butchers, fucking bricklayers, you name it. It was just screaming for people. And the money that you could earn per hour was more than you could earn in New Zealand. So in New Zealand, wages were low, prices were high, standard of living was far lower. So the plan was, Dad worked at the oil refinery for about 12 months, and Mum had another job as well. So they saved up enough money to bring Mum, Dad and 4 kids. And in those days, there was no passports even between Australia and New Zealand. A bit like, you could go all through Europe once upon a time without a passport. Passports are okay, we've segregated everybody. This is a country. Anyway, you could hop on a plane and say you were just going for a holiday and never go home. We're just going over to Perth for a holiday, and then just don't book one back. So he said, I think he said, bring your linen, that's pretty expensive here, but everything else, just sell it. Washing machines, beds, fucking everything. Don't try and bring it over on a boat, cost yourself money. You buy it here for cheap. People, so we landed in Australia, in Perth, and I'd never felt 35 degree heat before. 26 was a hot day, and high humidity where I came from. And I went, fuck this, Mum, this is an oven, we're going home. I don't like it. Straight up, it's flat, hot, sandy, fuck that. So it was a big culture shock. It wasn't like moving to China, but it was, because we still spoke English, but all of a sudden a chili bin was no longer a chili bin, was no longer a fucking chili bin, it was an esky, and jandals were all of a sudden thongs, which we thought was strange, because that's what, that's a G-string. So, but the culture shock was fairly severe enough. But once you realise that you've been transplanted into another world, like you've moved planets, pretty much, that's how it feels. and everything is strange and everything is different and everyone speaks different and they make fun of you and stuff from the way you speak or your accent. So you're an alien, you're a foreigner. And I looked around me and I thought to myself, well, the first thing I'm going to do is lose this fucking accent. And it took me about a year, and I actually practiced speaking in an Australian accent. I started copying the people that I worked with, and lucky enough, I was in a meat department in Woolworths. I got a job with my uncle first, and then I went and he couldn't afford to put me on as an apprentice, so I was an apprentice butcher for Woolworths, and I was working with Australians, and they treated me horrible at times. Firstly because I was an apprentice butcher, and secondly because I was a Kiwi. And I didn't know that I fucked sheep until I come to Australia and I found out I was a fucking sheep fucker. But they put my head in the brine and they hung me up on butcher's hooks and they did all sorts of stuff. They sent me out for a long wait, go to the shop and get a long wait. We needed to fix the bandsaw, all those tricks. And but within about a year, I slowly lost my accent. Either like a little bit of encouragement from myself and just naturally working with Aussies all the time. I didn't seek out the New Zealand community. I was like, well, I've been transported to Australia. So now this is a really good old days, guys. We didn't even have a tax file number, let alone ABNs and ACNs and all the fucking shit you got to go through nowadays to run a business and whatever. So we were relatively free. You could have a second job and a false name and address, and everyone got paid in cash. So we all worked during the day, and then we had a night gig. I worked in a boning room at night, packing meat into boxes, like still in the same trade, and we had this escape door in the corner because everyone in there was on a false name and a false address. Like the employer, there was no checks and balances or whatever the shit. Like if you could do the job and you turned up, they didn't give a fuck what your name was, what colour your skin was, who you were. They didn't care who you were. You were just another guy making a living. People saved up deposits for their houses and stuff by doing the two jobs. And the second one, we had this escape door in the back in this corner of the factory, and everyone knew if the stooges came in from the government, you ran out the door. One guy's going to come in and try and catch fucking 45 people working in a factory, and they're all just going to run out, and he's not going to know who's who, and they've all got a knife in their hand. So that was the plan, and it never happened. Well, not while I was there. We didn't get raided, so everyone was just doing that second job. Anyway, it was a very free time, and but over time, you learn about Australian culture and you learn about Johnny Farnham and stuff like that you've never heard of, and because it was a great time in the 80s for live music in the pubs and all that sort of thing. So before you know it, you've been there for 16 years and you were only ever 16 years in New Zealand. Well, this is in my case. And then once you get to 20 years, you go, well, I've been here for 20 years and I was only ever in New Zealand for 16 years, so I feel more Australian than New Zealand. And you learn lots about, Banjo Patterson and all the Australian folklore and culture and stuff. And well, that's what I did. And I immersed myself in Australian culture. And if I went and lived in South Korea, I would do the same there. I would learn their language and speak it as well as they do. And learn their history and their culture. I mean, that's how because when you say you're going to emigrate to a different country and assimilate with them, this is all about assimilation. That you must know their history and their culture, because although the government stands up and says we're a country, it's really a group of people that think alike and are going in the same direction for the good of their style of people, and there's no doubt that they're wrecking it now by bringing people into countries that they're not compatible with. that's happening in Australia too. That's you know. So I'm an immigrant, but I'm talking about the immigration of people from countries that don't share our values, can't behave themselves. Assimilation is possible, but you have to put your heart and soul into that country's culture and history. Learn how to speak like them. You can assimilate. The amount of Australians that I've met, like, you know, skin cancer surgeons and scientists and all sorts of fucking really smart people, financial people. I mean, there's shitloads of dumb people out there, especially nowadays. But this was Australia to a New Zealand. It was like America, you know. It's like far out, big, you know, lots more people and lots more opportunity and lots more money to make and stuff like that, you know. But if you love this country, you can assimilate. Well, you should assimilate. And the people of this country shouldn't let you in unless you assimilate pretty quickly. That's coming from an immigrant. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one.